I just want you to know right now that this video is gonna be long, okay? So this is where we left off. We talked about just looking at this triangle, and you see the radius? This is just one. So we call this circle what kind of circle? Yes. It's going to be a unit circle, yay! And so now here's the next thing. We talked about cosine theta, and we said cosine theta is adjacent leg over hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm gonna have to just use AL for adjacent leg and hypotenuse, okay? So in this triangle, you see this is theta, so your adjacent leg would be A, right? So there you go, A, and your hypotenuse is 1. And so what is A over 1? A. And then we have to talk about sine theta, and sine theta was opposite leg over hypotenuse. And so what is the opposite leg here? B, and what is the hypotenuse? 1. And so b divided by 1 is b, and we talked about tangent theta. Well, tangent theta, if we just look over here, that is the opposite leg over adjacent leg. And so our opposite leg would be B and our adjacent leg would be A. But if you look up here, A is the same as cosine. So down here is cosine theta. And if you look up here, B is the same as sine theta. Okay, so I pretty much told you that you don't have to really worry about anything else, right? All of this was just me explaining it to you. All you have to know is the very last part, which is cosine is what? That is A, sine is B, and tangent is sine theta over cosine theta. And so what I did was I erased everything in the middle. Then I told you to tell me what the Pythagorean theorem is. And of course, everybody told me the answer, which is a squared plus b squared plus c squared. But I said I don't want it like that because then you'll get confused with the a and b here. With the Pythagorean theorem, we're talking about a right triangle, and we have a leg here, and we have another leg. And we talked about how the two legs are going to be the two sides that is touching the 90-degree angle. And the side that is opposite the 90-degree angle is the hypotenuse, right? So we decided to call it leg, leg, and a hypo. So then, what is the Pythagorean theorem again? That will be your leg squared plus leg squared. And that equals hypo squared. And everybody got that, right? But then I said, we need to combine all of these together in the same screen. So looking at this triangle, this is a leg and this is a leg. So that would be, if you plug it into the Pythagorean theorem, you'll have a squared plus b squared equals, oh, the hypotenuse is 1 squared, and 1 squared happens to be 1. And then I said, let's go further. Let's see what you have here. What was a equal to? Cosine, so we're going to say cosine theta squared. And when you say cosine theta squared, you put the squared right next to the word cosine, and then you put the theta, because you're not squaring the degree, the measure of the angle. You're going to be squaring the whole thing, but you don't put it, so you don't put it outside, you put it inside, right close to cosine. Plus, what was b again? Yes, b is sine. So it's sine squared theta, and that equals 1 is obviously just 1. And there you go. This is your Pythagorean identity. And this is one of those formulas I told you gotta memorize, right? And remember, 2 plus 3 is 5 and 3 plus 2 is 5. Commutative property of addition. So this is the same as sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. So whenever you look anything up online, say using the word Pythagorean identity, you will see sine squared plus cosine squared theta equals 1, not the other one. Okay? And now, I told you gotta really remember this one because that's kind of important. And then from there, we moved on, right? And then in class, on the boards, I actually had you guys find the other two formula, which is right here. You had to pretty much solve for sine. So basically you wanted to find out what sine is equal to, and you wanted to find out what cosine theta is equal to. And in both cases, you started with sine squared. So please, write this down. You had to start with sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1 in both cases. But over here, you wanted to find out what sine is equal to, so you subtracted cosine squared theta from both sides, which gave you that. And then you wanted to find out sine theta, not sine squared. So you have to find the square root of both sides. And when you do that, you have the positive and negative pop up. And of course, you have to do the other side in the classroom. So again, please, I would like you to memorize this, but I know it's very difficult to memorize. That's why as long as you memorize the very first one up here, everything else you can derive yourself, okay? So please make sure you know how to derive it. Then, of course, we went straight into our question, didn't we? And so we did this together in class. And then you had to do this one on your own. And I'm very proud of you because you did a great job. But let me just go ahead and explain this really fast because this had two steps. First, you had to find sine theta, but then ultimately you had to find tangent theta, right? Wow, this is wrong. But anyhow, so there you go. First thing you do when you see cosine, tangent, stuff like that, I told you to draw the triangle with the SATC, right? And theta is where? In between pi over 2 and pi. That's in between 90 degrees and 180. So your triangle is right here because this is 0, 90, 180, right? This is the 90-degree angle, and this is your theta. So only sine is positive. This is in quadrant number 2. It lies in quadrant 2, so sine is greater than 0, okay? And so we're not looking for sine here. We're supposed to look for tangent theta because it says then find tangent theta, okay? So there you go. First, we start off by writing what cosine theta is. That is negative 0.993. And then what we had to remember was try and remember the formula that we just derived, right? And so sine theta, and because sine over here is positive, we're going to use positive. And it was the square root of 1 minus cosine squared theta. Okay? And then after that, all we had to do was instead of cosine, you had to plug this number in. Okay? So there you go. Sine theta equals the square root of 1 minus negative 0.993 squared. And that's all you had to do, really. And then I told you to go to Desmos and plug that number in, right? And so in case you forgot, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do it one more time. Okay, so obviously you go to Desmos first. And then I said do not put in the y, start off with the square root, right? And then you put 1 minus, and then go ahead and open up your parentheses and put negative 0.993, and then you gotta square it. But some of you are putting the square right here on the outside. That would be wrong, okay? So you gotta make sure that you put the square right here, okay, right here, but not inside the parentheses, okay? So when you do that, you'll get your answer, which is 0.118. The question said 3 decimal points, right? So you're gonna stop right there because after the 8 is a 1, right? So more than 5, give a score, less than 4, let it rest. Oh gosh, I forgot. What was it that you learned in kindergarten, right? But anyhow, your answer is 0.118. And that is your answer for this one right here, okay? So there you go. Sine theta, we found out, is 0.118, okay? But we're not trying to find sine. It says then find tangent theta, okay? So then this is the part that where you impressed me because you went the extra mile on your own without me helping you, right? Because the previous question didn't have that part. It stopped right here. So what you had to do was you had to look at your notes and remember that tangent theta was sine theta over cosine theta. And because now you have sine and cosine, all you have to do to find tangent was plug it in. So sine is 0.118 and cosine is negative 0.993, right? And so we just have to plug it into our calculator and we will get our answer, right? So my answer would be negative 0.11119 because I have to round to 3 decimal places. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check my answer, but I have a feeling it's going to tell me I'm wrong because they already have a misprint right here. It's supposed to be tangent theta, but we'll see. Even if it says wrong, just know that I am right, okay? Negative 0.119. There you go. Let's go ahead and check our answer. Thank goodness. Okay, this is just a misprint. This is supposed to be tangent theta, and the answer shows that it is correct. Okay, so now that was what we did in class today, but then, we have more stuff that we have to do. So I just wanted to finish off the video, right? And so here's the last question that you really have to know how to solve before I feel confident about, letting you work on your own in your little groups, okay? So here's your very last question, okay? And that is this right here. It says, given that tangent theta is this, and so again, we're talking about tangent and all that stuff, so we gotta draw our triangle first, and our triangle is in between 180 and 270 degrees. So it's like this is 90 degrees, this is your theta. Okay, so this is SA, TC. So we already know what? That only tangent is going to be positive, duh. So sine and cosine is going to be negative. It says find the values of sine and cosine, and then if necessary, round to 3 decimal places. So we're in quadrant 3, so both answers are going to be negative. So I'm going to just put the negative there to remind myself, okay? So what do you think you're supposed to use? So if you look in your notes, you'll remember that part. Tangent theta is equal to sine theta over cosine theta, okay? So you have to use this one. But look, they only gave us the tangent, and now all of a sudden they want us to find sine and cosine theta. That's because you gotta use 2 formulas, okay? So first, we don't like fractions, so let's get rid of the cosine, okay? So how do you get rid of it? You're going to multiply both sides by cosine theta. And what that makes it do is they cancel out the cosine. So then you're just going to be left with cosine theta times tangent theta equals sine theta. And what's really cool is you already know what tangent is. So instead of tangent, you're going to plug in that number. So cosine theta times 3.459. And that's going to equal sine theta. Well, that didn't really help you much because you still don't know what sine and cosine is, right? And so that's why you gotta use the sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1, the Pythagorean identity. And what I'm gonna do is, instead of sine, I'm going to plug in this whole thing because sine is equal to that whole thing. So you see the sine over here? Okay, so it says sine squared theta. Instead of this, I'm going to plug in that. So let me go ahead and do that. Well, a number times cosine, the number is supposed to come first. So I'm going to go 3.459, okay, times cosine theta, the whole thing squared, because I'm supposed to square it, right? Plus, and then I copy the rest. Cosine squared theta equals 1. Now I'm going to use my handy dandy calculator. And then I'm going to square this, right? I'm going to put everything in 3 decimal forms. I'm going to round to 3 decimal places, okay? So there you go. I'm going to go 11.965 cosine squared theta, okay? Because you gotta square this and also that. So I use my calculator to square this. And then the cosine theta squared, you just put the squared right there, okay? So now I copy the other one. That gives me 1. Now we have to combine like terms. I don't know if you can see this, but look, this one is cosine squared theta, and this is also cosine squared theta. So we could combine them, right? So in other words, we can go 11.965 plus 1, which is 12.965, and then we're just going to keep the cosine squared theta. In case you don't understand this part, it's kind of like 11.965x plus x, 1x, okay? So cosine squared theta is kind of like an x. You just keep it the same, right? So then if you want to find out what cosine squared theta is equal to, what do you have to do? What's the relationship between the 12.965 and that? Yes, multiplication, so you gotta divide it. Well, I don't have any space here, so what should I do? I'm just gonna go ahead and just erase this part. That is actually not a good idea at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite everything starting from the top. So there you go. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. I'm just copying all this stuff but putting it up here. 3.459 cosine theta squared plus cosine squared theta equals 1. And then I'm copying the next line. 11.965 cosine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equals 1. Okay, and then I'm going to erase it so I could make more room. And then I explained this. The next one is 12.965 cosine squared theta equals 1. In order for you to find this, you know you gotta divide both sides by 12.965. And so that's going to give you cosine squared theta equals, and then let me go ahead and use my handy dandy calculator. And that gives me 0.7, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. 0.077. But we don't want to know what the squared is, so let's undo it by finding the square root. And when we do that, we're going to all of a sudden have a positive and negative, right? Positive and negative, and then I'm going to use my calculator to find the value for that. And that gave me 0.277. So now we know cosine is what? Oh, I already put a negative here, right? Because it was in the third quadrant. So my answer is negative 0.277. 0.277. I still have to find sine. So if I want to find sine theta, what do I have to do? I have to go back to this right here. This formula right here. Sine theta was equal to cosine theta times 3.459, right? So instead of cosine, now I have the answer. So I'm going to put this number over there where it says cosine. So let's just go ahead and do that, and I'm going to use black, okay? So cosine is obviously negative. So instead of cosine theta, I'm going to put negative, negative 0.277, and then I'm going to multiply that by 3.459, and that's supposed to be my sine theta. So of course I'm going to use my handy dandy calculator. And that is going to give me sine theta is equal to negative, because negative times a positive is negative, 0.958. So there you go. This answer is negative 0.958. And we are done. But of course, it feels so good when I plug in the numbers for you, right? So let's go ahead and do it. Let's see it. Negative 0.958. Okay. And for cosine, it's negative 0.958. 0.277. And let's check off our answer just for the satisfaction of it. And of course, it says it's correct. And that's it. I know this question was really intense, right? So in class, I want you to practice this question. There's only one. And then after that, of course, you're going to go into the evaluate section down here. And then I'm going to tell you which questions I want you to work on with your friends. Well, happy learning!